June 7, 1940. Chrysler Headquarters, Highland Park, Michigan. A phone call lasting just 7 minutes would change the course of modern warfare. On one end was William Knudsen, President Roosevelt's newly appointed Commissioner of Industrial Production. On the other, K.T. Keller, President of Chrysler Corporation. Knudsen's question was deceptively simple. Can Chrysler build tanks? Keller's reply was honest. I don't know. I've never seen one of these things. At that moment, the U.S. Army owned just 66 medium tanks, while Nazi Germany had already deployed over 3,000, crushing Poland and France in lightning-fast blitzkrieg campaigns. The numbers alone spelled disaster, yet that conversation between two industrial minds would ignite the most dramatic transformation in military production history. Within 9 months, Chrysler would achieve the impossible, mass-producing 30-ton tanks like automobiles, one every 55 minutes at peak output. The journey began with a staggering handicap. In 1940, the U.S. ranked 19th in military power, behind Portugal. Its army had more horses than tanks, and its manufacturing methods were relics of World War I. Tanks were hand-built by craftsmen at arsenals like Rock Island, Illinois, 3 tanks per month, each taking 12 weeks. Germany was producing over 1,000 per year. The math was hopeless. Yet Keller and his engineers, B.E. Hutchinson, Frank Zeder, and Owen Skelton, refused to see impossibility. We won't build tanks the Army's way, Keller declared. We'll build them our way. They studied tank production at Rock Island and were horrified. Workers hand-fitted armor plates, eyeballed tolerances, and customized each component. No 2 tanks were identical. This isn't manufacturing, Keller said. It's sculpture. If Chrysler was to deliver 1,000 tanks in 18 months, it needed to industrialize the process. The team reimagined the tank as a mechanical assembly, like a car, just bigger. Using automotive tolerances, interchangeable parts, and a moving assembly line, Chrysler would turn tank building from craft into science. Each part would be precision machined so it could bolt directly into place, eliminating hours of fitting. Every stage of assembly would be broken into specialized, repeatable tasks. By November 1940, Chrysler had devised what they called the Chrysler method, the first true blueprint for mass-producing armored vehicles. When Keller presented it to the U.S. Army, skepticism filled the room. Army engineers insisted that automotive tolerances weren't strong enough for combat. Welded armor would fail, they warned. Moving assembly lines were unthinkable, Keller countered with the only argument that mattered. You need 1,000 tanks in 18 months. We can deliver them. Can anyone else? The Army relented, awarding Chrysler an unprecedented contract to design, build, and operate an entirely new tank plant, the Detroit Arsenal. Designed by Albert Kahn, the architectural genius behind Ford's Highland Park and River Rouge plants, it would be the first factory in history built solely for tank production. Kahn envisioned the facility as a machine in itself. 1.25 million square feet under one roof. Walls 3 feet thick for bomb resistance, and a main assembly line stretching nearly a quarter mile. Beneath the floor, a sunken trench allowed tanks to glide along carriers so workers could access their undersides without lifts. It was industrial artistry at national scale. Construction began in September 1940 and raced through Michigan's brutal winter. The building was unfinished, windows missing, walls open, heating incomplete. Yet Chrysler began assembling tanks anyway. Workers wore heavy coats as their breath froze in the air, warmed only by a steam locomotive parked inside the factory. Amid this chaos, the first tank rolled off the line on April 12, 1941. It was an M3 medium tank, obsolete even as it was born, but historically revolutionary. It was the first tank ever mass-produced on an automobile-style assembly line. Within months, Chrysler's Detroit Arsenal was operating at full stride. 1 tank per day became 2, then 4, then 10. The company's engineering brilliance shone in every problem solved. A redesigned transmission cut assembly time from 40 hours to 4. A fully welded hull replaced riveted plates, stronger and faster to produce. The most audacious innovation came from engineer Harry Wilson, the A57 multibank engine. 5 automobile engines linked together to power one tank. It was complex, yet practical, using existing tools and parts. Critics called it absurd. It worked flawlessly. By December 1941, as America reeled from the attack on Pearl Harbor, the arsenal's methods became the nation's lifeline. Tank demand exploded overnight, and Chrysler responded by scaling production at wartime speed. Welding schools trained 50 operators per week. Supplier networks expanded across 32 states. Over 400 companies contributed parts: track pins from Wisconsin, armor plates from Ohio, engine castings from Pennsylvania. By mid-1942, the Detroit arsenal was producing 18 tanks per day, more than all German factories combined. In December alone, 886 Sherman tanks rolled off the line, a record unmatched anywhere in the world. The M4 Sherman, the direct descendant of the M3, became the workhorse of Allied armies. Reliable, easy to repair, and built in staggering numbers, it wasn't the most powerful tank, but it was always there. While Germany produced 24,000 tanks during the war, America built nearly 90,000. 1 in every 4 came from Chrysler's Detroit arsenal. Its workers, housewives, farmers, and recent graduates, had become the soldiers of industrial warfare. When the war ended, the arsenal had produced 22,234 tanks. The plant went on to build Pattons, M60s, and eventually components for the M1 Abrams. Though production ended in 1996, its legacy endures. The Detroit arsenal proved that private industry could outproduce any enemy, and that engineering ingenuity could overcome ignorance, tradition, and time itself. The men behind the miracle met different fates. K.T. Keller led Chrysler through the war and retired in 1956. Albert Kahn died in 1942, just months after seeing his greatest creation reach full output. William Knudsen became the highest-ranking civilian ever, commissioned in the U.S. Army, a lieutenant, general, and died in 1948. But their combined achievement reshaped how nations wage war. Before Detroit Arsenal, tanks were handcrafted by artisans. After it, they were products of industrial systems. The arsenal turned engineering into a weapon and demonstrated that the true power of a nation lay not just in its soldiers, but in its factories, its machines, and the ingenuity of its engineers. It showed that when America applied mass production to warfare, it could outproduce, outlast, and ultimately outfight any adversary. Today, few passing through Warren, Michigan realize the ground beneath them once thundered with the birth of an industrial revolution. The tanks are gone, the walls demolished, but the idea remains. No problem is impossible if you refuse to see it that way. The Detroit arsenal didn't just build tanks. It built proof. Proof that innovation and courage, multiplied by industry, can change the world. That was the 7-minute phone call that built the arsenal of democracy and won the war.